My name is Julian Vance. I am 29 years old. When I was 17, my mother stood in the center of our kitchen, looked at my father, and said, "He took the money, Richard. He took his sister's college fund, and we are going to have to look at him every day and pretend we don't know he's a thief." She said it loud enough for my sister to hear from the landing of the stairs. It was a Tuesday in October, 4:15 in the afternoon. The afternoon sun was cutting a sharp yellow rectangle across the hardwood floor. I was wearing my track uniform. I was holding a glass of tap water. That was the exact moment I became the family criminal. The amount was $84,500. It was the sum total of an account my grandfather had set up for my younger sister Chloe when she was born. My mother held a stack of printed papers in her left hand. She claimed she had found them on my desk. They were wire transfer confirmations, showing the entire balance moved into an offshore shell account, initiated from my computer, using my user profile. I did not know how to wire money. I did not have the password to my father's administrative banking portal. But my mother looked at my father with tears pooling perfectly in the lower lids of her eyes, and she broke her voice in exactly the right place, and she told him that I had confessed it to her. I stood there and I said, "I didn't do it." I said it 4 times. My father did not look at me. He looked at the floor, and he said, "Family protects family. We will not involve the police, but you are no longer my son." Last Saturday, 12 years later, at my sister Chloe's $100,000 wedding reception, 140 guests clinked their champagne glasses to celebrate the mother of the bride. Then a man in a gray suit walked through the double doors of the ballroom, placed a red bank ledger on the head table, and spoke sentences that would unravel a decade of a perfectly orchestrated lie. Welcome to Revenger episodes. If you have ever been the scapegoat used to cover someone else's tracks, the son whose name was ruined to buy a mother's luxury, the child forced to carry the weight of an adult's sins while they smiled for the camera, this one is for you. Stay with me to the end. And down in the comments, tell me the lie they told to keep their own hands clean. Tell me the crime they pinned on your shoulders to preserve their own reflection. I read every single one. For 12 years, I was the cautionary tale of the Vance extended family. I was allowed to attend holidays, but only on the periphery. I was the dark spot on the pristine canvas my mother painted for the world. When relatives asked what I was doing, my mother would lower her voice, touch her collarbone, and say, "Julian is finding his way. We just pray he makes better choices." I moved out the day I turned 18. I paid my own way through a state college by working night shifts at a logistics warehouse. I became a forensic data analyst for a mid-sized accounting firm in Boston. My job every day is to look at numbers and find the lie. I trace the money that people think they have successfully hidden. I am very good at my job because I have spent my entire adult life knowing exactly what it looks like when a person creates a paper trail to frame a ghost. 3 years ago, I started going to a therapist named Dr. Reese. In the 5th month, Dr. Reese asked me why I still went to family dinners if I was forced to sit at the end of the table and listen to my mother's quiet, devastating remarks about trust and betrayal. I told him I went for Chloe. Chloe had been 13 when the money vanished. She had lost her college fund, but she had never fully lost her brother. She would call me in secret. She would meet me for coffee. She believed I had stolen the money, but she believed I had done it out of some desperate teenage sickness, and she had forgiven me. I sat in those family dinners because I wanted my sister to know I would never abandon her, even if I was the villain in her story. Dr. Reese looked at me and said, "Julian, you have spent 12 years auditing strangers. Why have you never audited your own kitchen?" That was the first time it occurred to me that I had the power to look backward. I did not do the audit myself. The rules of evidence require an objective third party. I hired a man named Marcus. Marcus is a senior forensic accountant who specializes in high net worth marital asset tracing. I paid him his $25,000 retainer using money I had saved by living in a studio apartment and driving a 10-year-old car. I gave Marcus my father's old banking details, my mother's maiden name, and the exact date of the wire transfer. I told him to find the $84,500. It took Marcus 18 months. He had to subpoena records from 3 different defunct offshore holding companies. He had to trace shell corporations registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. But numbers do not lie. Numbers do not cry perfectly in the middle of a kitchen. Numbers do not tell a father that his son is a thief. By the time Chloe's wedding day arrived last Saturday, Marcus had compiled a single red ledger. The reception was held at the Oakmont Country Club. The driveway was lined with imported white hydrangeas. The floral budget alone was $22,000. I arrived 14 minutes after the toasts began. I did not sit at the head table. My mother had placed my name card at table 12. Table 12 was located directly beside the swinging doors of the catering kitchen. Every time a waiter walked through, the sound of clattering dishes washed over the conversation. I sat in the draft of the kitchen doors and I drank sparkling water and I waited. My mother was standing at the microphone on the elevated dais. She wore a sapphire silk gown that pooled around her feet. She wore a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light from the chandeliers. She had spent 6 months planning this wedding. She had controlled every napkin fold, every seating arrangement, every song on the playlist. She tapped a silver fork against her crystal flute. The room of 140 people fell silent. My father sat beside her, looking exhausted in his tuxedo. Chloe sat on the other side, glowing in white, holding her new husband's hand. "We sacrificed everything for Chloe," my mother said into the microphone. Her voice was warm, honeyed, dripping with the practiced humility of a martyr. "We all know this family has faced its dark times. We all know what it means to be robbed of a future you planned for. When Chloe's college fund was taken from us, I looked at Richard and I said, we will rebuild. We will not let betrayal define this family. We will give our daughter the world, no matter what it costs us." The room gave a collective, sympathetic sigh. I saw 3 of my aunts press tissues to their eyes. My father looked down at his plate. He had been looking down at his plate for 12 years. He did not drink in public. He just rubbed his thumb over the gold band on his left hand. At exactly 8:15 p.m., the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Marcus walked in. He was wearing a dark gray suit. He carried a red bank ledger under his left arm. He did not pause to look at the ice sculptures. He did not look at the floral arrangements. He walked with the heavy, unhurried stride of a man who is bringing an execution order. He walked directly up the center aisle, past the 140 silent guests, and he stepped up onto the dais. My mother stopped speaking. Her smile froze. She lowered the microphone. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dropping its honeyed tone. "This is a private event. You cannot be up here." Marcus did not look at her. He looked at my father. He placed the red ledger directly on top of my father's dinner plate, right over the untouched filet mignon. "Mr. Vance," Marcus said. His voice was not loud, but it carried perfectly across the silent ballroom. "My name is Marcus Sterling. I am a forensic accountant. The audit of the marital accounts, the offshore trusts, and the missing college fund is complete." My mother dropped the microphone. It hit the parquet floor with a sharp, shrieking screech of feedback that made half the room flinch. The sound echoed for 3 seconds and died. "Richard, have him removed," my mother whispered. Her face had gone the color of old paper. "Have him removed right now." My father did not call for security. He looked at the red ledger. It was thick. It was heavy. He reached out with a trembling hand and opened the cover. Inside the ledger were 47 withdrawal slips and wire transfers. The first one was dated 12 years ago, on the exact Tuesday in October when my mother had stood in the kitchen and cried. It was a transfer of $84,500 to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. But Marcus had not just found the transfer, he had found the destination. He had found the receipts. He had printed every single one and bound them in the ledger. There was a lease agreement for a Porsche 911 in my mother's name. There was a deed for a luxury timeshare in Aspen, Colorado, held in a trust under my mother's maiden name. There were itemized medical receipts from a private cosmetic surgery clinic in Beverly Hills, documenting 6 years of procedures my mother had claimed were medically necessary biopsies. She had taken the money. She had taken her own daughter's future, funneled it through a maze of dummy accounts, and when the money was gone and the statements arrived, she had printed a fake transfer slip, left it on my desk, and blamed the 17-year-old son who didn't even know his own bank password. My father turned the pages. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 140 people were holding their breath. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. You could hear the ice shifting in the water glasses. My father read the first page. He read the second page. He looked at the signature on the timeshare deed. It was her signature. The loops were unmistakable. He looked up. He did not look at Marcus. He did not look at the guests. He looked at my mother. 30 years of a marriage, 30 years of blind devotion, 30 years of choosing his wife over his son, shattered in the space of 4 seconds, when he finally spoke. His voice was not a yell. It was not a scream. It was a funeral. You made me disown my son, he said. The words cracked through the room. You stole from our daughter. You spent it on yourself. And you looked me in the eye and made me throw my boy out of his own house. My mother took a step backward. She bumped into the champagne tower. 2 glasses wobbled and fell, shattering on the stage. Richard, it's forged, she said, her voice small, high, and desperate. Julian made this. Julian is trying to ruin us again. Julian did this. Chloe stood up. My sister, who had worn white, who had smiled for the cameras, who had believed for 12 years that her brother was a thief, she stepped away from her new husband. She walked around the head table. She did not look at our mother. She walked down the steps of the days. She walked down the center aisle. She walked past the aunts who were no longer holding tissues. She walked all the way to the back of the room, to table 12. Beside the swinging doors of the catering kitchen. I stood up. She reached out and took my hand. She did not say a word. She just gripped my fingers so hard her knuckles went white, and she stood beside me, facing the front of the room. My father closed the red ledger. He stood up from his chair. He took his tuxedo jacket off and laid it over the back of his seat. He picked up the ledger, turned his back on my mother, and walked off the stage. He walked down the aisle, stopped in front of me, and he did something I had not seen him do since I was a child. He wept. He stood in front of 140 people, and he wept, and he put his hand on the back of my neck. We left the country club together. My father, my sister, and me. We left my mother standing alone on the days in her sapphire dress, surrounded by 140 people who now knew exactly what she was. In the weeks that followed, the architecture of our family was dismantled and rebuilt. My father filed for divorce the following Monday. He surrendered the timeshare. He sold the Porsche. He liquidated every asset my mother had hidden, and he placed it all into a trust in Chloe's name. He moved out of the house and into an apartment in Boston, 3 blocks from where I live. He comes over for coffee on Sunday mornings. We are learning how to talk to each other again. It is slow. It is quiet. It is the work of men who have to figure out how to bridge a 12-year gap made of lies. My mother lives in a smaller house now. She does not attend the country club. The women who used to nod in sympathy when she spoke of her tragic son now cross the street when they see her in the grocery store. She sent me an email last week. The subject line said, "I hope you are happy." I did not open it. I dragged it to the trash. I do not need her to understand what she did. I only needed the truth to be spoken in the room where the lie was born. I keep the red ledger on a bookshelf in my apartment. I do not open it. I do not need to read the numbers anymore. Some people inherit heirlooms, silver, or properties. I inherited a forensic accounting report, and it is the most valuable thing I have ever owned. It is the proof that my mind was not playing tricks on me. It is the proof that the boy who stood in the kitchen 12 years ago was telling the truth. If you are reading this right now, and you are the one they blamed, you are not alone. If anyone has ever stolen your innocence to pay for their pride, if they have ever used your reputation as a shield for their own corruption, write the word ledger in the comments. It is a terrible thing to be the family ghost. It is a beautiful thing to finally haunt them back. I am Revenger episodes. Stay with me. There is a quieter one waiting for next.